So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to comment to this paper and to the conclusions. First of all, the usual disclaimer: my opinions are not necessarily represent the opinions of the Central Bank of Chile or its board. So having said that, let's go over to the main conclusions of this paper, and let me propose some questions and suggestions. I don't know if I'm going to propose some particularly good comments, because I think it's a very neat paper, and it's very straightforward, and with methodology that is very hard to question. So first of all, just to summarize, for me, this paper relates to 2 areas of investigation about the development and use of the ESG ratings. The 2 areas are the disagreement of the ESG rating score available, what just Monica showed in his presentation, and the economic and financial performance of the ESG portfolio. So the document investigates the implication that ESG ratings disagreement might have on the ESG portfolio performance, and the authors analyze and conclude basically that a ESG rating criteria analysis implies there is a lack of common standards that is very evident in the different standards and the different considerations and the methodology under the ESG ratings. So this heterogeneity of the ESG standards generates different evaluations for the same companies, which is something expected, and this small overlap, of course, given the difference of the constituents of these basically portfolios and standards, disperse the effect of the preference of ESG investors. So there is no significant ESG impact on performance. So let me go over and divide my comments in 3 main aspects. The first one is the literature, because this is based on 2 separate sources and of literature. The 3 aspects that the ESG rating literature revised and conclude that some harmonization is needed. That is also not pretty obvious, but very evident given the way that the ESG ratings are formed. So there is an impact, usually a positive impact, although it's not conclusive, but it's an impact of the ESG efforts on companies' profitability. There's a lot of literature that finds that. So there's a performance gains usually on the ESG firms or portfolio investments. And also there's effects, positive sometimes, of ESG factors on credit ratings. All the above results are dependent basically on the ESG data, the ESG ratings, evaluations, and also the ESG accounting. So one of the questions for the debate are those: are the results dependent on this ESG ratings only, basically? So maybe there's another underlying source of further results, basically. And it has to do with my second comment: is profitability return the best way to account for or measure the ESG performance? Because ESG is very broad, so you have environmental, social, and corporate governance aspects. So those aspects need necessarily to be related with performance or like traditional profitability of firms. Maybe we need to incorporate some other aspects to measure the different performances different from profitability or return. And the third question is it possible to have a good and consistent ESG ratings if we don't have first consistent and accepted ESG taxonomy? I understand that this is something that you can deduct or conclude from an ESG rating. That we're trying to do is to classify the behavior of these companies. And this is something that now is appearing as a need, and we have a lot of jurisdiction around the world that are working into a taxonomy, not to properly evaluate or rate a company, but some activities, so productive activities. So maybe in the future, when we have some taxonomy that would be commonly accepted, or would be a big overlap among taxonomies around the world, we could have maybe a good or better ESG ratings, or maybe if we have this taxonomy, if we have better ESG ratings, also could also support a better taxonomy. So that's the first part, and the second way of conclusion of this paper is that the ESG rating differ from each other, affecting the constitution of the ESG investment portfolios. So the ESG ratings methodology, the weights, the variables are different. That also is very evident. And the company's ESG rating evaluation strongly varies across rating agencies, and correlation is in my opinion, very low. The percentage of agreement among ESG ratings is low also, which affects the consistency of the indexes, the ESG indexes and portfolios. So one question, I don't know if you find that in your investigation, is there an ESG rating that outperformed the rest? So what we don't see, maybe it's not the scope of the paper, but we don't see if one of these ESG ratings have better results, or one of these portfolios based on one of these ESG ratings has better results in terms of profitability or other measurement. And also it's very important, I believe, to understand or to find out what is the internal correlation among E, S, and G component of the ESG. And I understand in the final part of your paper, you have as a future work to try to understand the individual components of the ESG, because in my opinion, that is something different, for example, for climate change. Because in climate change aspect of a company, it's more narrow, the aspect that I'm considering, or there is considering affecting the performance of a company. Here, environment, social, and governance maybe are correlated, but at sometimes very different aspect. And also you can see that in the indicators. And also the third question is it possible that the agreement indicator is capturing an underlying non-observable variable? So here we have a very narrow scope of companies that are present in these different ESG portfolios that you selected. But my question is, maybe it could be good to test if there's another underlying
Álvaro, please.
Just give me 2 minutes, Carlos, and because maybe are these big companies, they have another correlation. And the last part, given just let me skip this. But this is how the conclusion that the ESG index agreement among ESG ratings do not significantly affect the portfolio performance. One minor question is that is the year 2005 an exogenous division of the sample? I understand that after 2005, this ESG rating start, but maybe it could be useful to test if 2005 maybe is an exogenous way to divide the sample, and maybe if it's a way to test maybe this another turning point or to when this company maybe change their performance because of the ESG ratings. And for me, it's not so clear. Maybe you can elaborate in that if you have time. Why the non-outperforming of an ESG agreement portfolio is a consequence of the disagreement of the ESG ratings. In this specification, for me, it's not clear if there's a space for other explanation. And finally, given the particular aspect, and this is something that I mentioned before, of the ESG components, are the traditional ask pricing specifications suitable for the portfolio evaluation? This is more a very broad question, maybe unfair, because in the paper you use a very traditional specification strategy to evaluate this, but maybe because for the specificity of the ESG components and because it's maybe a non-traditional part of a company in terms of like profits, maybe are not the best specification. But it's a very open question, maybe unfair, because I don't have any suggestions of what could be a good way to evaluate this with a different estimation strategy. So thank you so much, and again, it's a very good paper, and thank you for the opportunity to commend this to Monica and the co-authors. Thank you.